Hello everyone and welcome to today's presentation. I'm excited to be here with you. Today we will be exploring Class 12 Chemistry, specifically Chapter number 9, which is all about coordination compounds. We'll discuss what they are, how they work, and their significance in chemistry. So let's get started and dive into this fascinating topic. Let's move on to Slide 8, which is the conclusion of our presentation. Here, we'll summarize the key ideas we've discussed. We'll revisit the importance of understanding coordination compounds and their significance in both chemistry and everyday life. Remember, these concepts form the foundation for more advanced topics, so grasping them thoroughly will be very beneficial. Now, let's see how all these points connect to give us a comprehensive understanding of the subject. Welcome to Slide 3. Today, we're focusing on the revised syllabus for 2020-21. This revision was made to better align our curriculum with current educational standards and ensure that our students are receiving the most relevant and comprehensive knowledge. The key points here include updates to the content to make it more engaging and accessible, as well as incorporating new topics that reflect recent developments in the field. These changes aim to enhance the overall learning experience and better prepare students for future challenges. It's important to see this revision as part of our ongoing effort to improve and adapt our teaching to meet the evolving needs of our learners. Let's start by looking at bonding, which is fundamental to understanding coordination compounds. We'll explore Werner's theory, which was a groundbreaking step in explaining how these complexes form and behave. Then, we'll move on to valence bond theory, or VBT, that provides a more detailed picture of how bonds form between the central metal and ligands. Following that, crystal field theory, or CFD, helps us understand the electronic structure and properties of these compounds, especially their colors and magnetic behavior. Speaking of color, it's one of the most striking features of coordination compounds. The vivid hues are due to electronic transitions within the d orbitals, and understanding this helps us interpret their properties. Next, we'll review the IUPAC nomenclature of mononuclear coordination compounds, which is essential for clear communication and nomming these complex structures accurately. The concept of coordination number is also key. It tells us how many ligand atoms are directly bonded to the central metal ion. This influences the shape, stability, and reactivity of the compound. Magnetic properties and shapes are closely related. For example, some compounds are paramagnetic, indicating unpaired electrons, while others are diamagnetic. The shape of the complex, whether tetrahedral or octahedral, also affects these magnetic characteristics. Now, let's clarify what ligands are. These are molecules or ions that donate electron pairs to the metal. Ligands are diverse, and understanding their types helps us predict the structure and reactivity of the complex. Finally, this slide introduces the broader topic of coordination compounds, setting the stage for a more detailed exploration of their properties, structures, and applications as we progress through the presentation. Let's take a look at how coordination compounds are actually involved in our daily lives. These compounds are more common than you might think. For example, think about the role of metal complexes in our medicines, like in certain drugs used to treat illnesses. They help improve the effectiveness of treatment by binding selectively to specific parts of the body. Another interesting point is their use in agriculture, where coordination compounds are used in fertilizers to supply essential nutrients to plants more efficiently. They also play a role in dyes and pigments we see in textiles and food products, giving vibrant colors that last longer. Understanding their everyday applications really highlights how chemistry is all around us, often working behind the scenes to improve our quality of life. This connection emphasizes the importance of studying coordination compounds, as they have practical significance in many aspects of our daily routines. Coordination compounds have a wide range of applications beyond just chemistry. They are used in medicinal chemistry, for developing drugs and treatments. You'll also find them in textile dyeing, where they help produce vibrant and lasting colors. Additionally, they play a crucial role in electroplating, which is essential for metal finishing and coating processes. But their importance doesn't stop there. Coordination compounds are also key in various metallurgical processes, industrial catalysts, and analytical reagents. These applications highlight how versatile and vital these compounds are across different industries. You might already be familiar with some natural examples, like chlorophyll, hemoglobin, and vitamin B12. These are all coordination compounds involving magnesium, iron, and cobalt, respectively. Interestingly, in the past, we used to call these complex compounds. Understanding their importance helps us see how foundational coordination compounds are in both biological systems and industrial applications, connecting chemistry to everyday life and technological advancements. Let's talk about the discovery of coordination compounds. This was a significant milestone in the field of chemistry. Historically, these compounds were observed when certain elements, especially transition metals, formed complex structures with other molecules or ions. The key breakthrough was understanding that these compounds involve a central metal atom or ion bonded to surrounding ligands, which are molecules or ions that donate electron pairs. Recognizing this concept of coordination was crucial because it explained many complex behaviors of metals in biological systems, catalysis, and material science. It also opened up new avenues for synthesizing compounds with specific properties. Overall, the discovery of coordination compounds was foundational in expanding our understanding of chemical bonding beyond simple ionic or covalent interactions, highlighting the importance of these structures in both natural and industrial processes. As we move to this slide, you'll notice that the color of the compounds changes simultaneously, which is quite significant. When we treated 1 mole of each of these compounds with excess silver nitrate solution, we observed that different amounts of silver chloride precipitated, as shown in the table. This indicates that the compounds have varying chloride contents. Furthermore, we separated these compounds and found an interesting pattern. The number of cobalt and chloride atoms remains constant across them, but the number of ammonia molecules varies. This suggests that ammonia is the variable component affecting the compound's properties. Additional experiments conducted by other scientists revealed that these solutions are actually mixtures of various colored cobalt complexes containing chloride and ammonia. This diversity of colors and compositions hints at the complexity of coordination compounds. It's important to connect this to the overall theme: the systematic development of modern coordination chemistry. Historically, it all began in 1798 with the French chemist B.M. Tassert, who discovered that ammoniacal solutions of cobalt chloride develop a distinctive brownish-red color. This discovery was a key stepping stone in understanding the nature of coordination compounds. Let's take a closer look at the last 2 compounds listed in Table 9.1. Although they both share the same empirical formula, CoCl3, 4NH3, they actually have different properties. This is a classic example of what we call isomers, compounds with the same formula but different structures. Now, within these structures, notice the atoms inside the square brackets. These atoms behave collectively like a single ion. Werner introduced the term secondary valence to describe the number of groups directly bound to the central metal ion. In these examples, that secondary valence is 6, meaning 6 groups are attached to the metal. It's also important to understand which parts of these compounds can react with silver nitrate, AgNO3. From their structural formulas, only the ions outside the square brackets are reactive in this context. These are called the primary valence sites. And speaking of reactions, the ICSE precipitation table helps us see how much silver chloride precipitates with each compound. For CoCl3, 3NH3, the amount of AgCl precipitated is indicated as X, while for CoCl3, 4NH3, it's why this data helps us understand the reactivity differences between these compounds, even though they share the same empirical formula. Werner's theory of coordination compounds is a fundamental concept in understanding how these complex molecules are structured. Essentially, Werner proposed that metal ions are at the center, and they coordinate with surrounding ligands through coordinate bonds. These ligands are molecules or ions that can donate a pair of electrons to the metal. This theory helps us explain the geometry and bonding in coordination compounds. One key idea is that the metal ion has a specific number of coordination sites, which determines the shape of the complex. For example, some metals prefer octahedral arrangements, while others might form tetrahedral or square planar geometries. The theory also introduces the concept of primary and secondary valencies, primary being the oxidation state, and secondary related to the coordination number, which tells us how many ligands are attached. Overall, Werner's theory was groundbreaking because it provided a clear explanation for the structure and bonding of coordination compounds, tying together their properties and behavior. It bridges the gap between simple ionic bonding and more complex molecular interactions, which is essential for understanding the chemistry of these fascinating compounds. Let's take a closer look at some examples of coordination geometries. The ions Co, NH3, 6,3+, Co-Cl, NH3, 5,2+, and Co-Cl2, NH3, 4+, are all octahedral in shape. That means the ligands are arranged around the metal center in a way that forms an 8-faced polyhedron, which is quite common for transition metal complexes. On the other hand, Ni, Co4, adopts a tetrahedral shape, where the 4 ligands are positioned at the corners of a tetrahedron. This is also a frequently observed geometry. And then we have PTCl42, which is square planar. Here, the 4 ligands are positioned at the corners of a flat square around the platinum center. These shapes, octahedral, tetrahedral, and square planar, are the most common geometries you'll see in transition metal coordination compounds. Recognizing these shapes helps us understand the structure and properties of these complexes. Remember, these arrangements are dictated by the coordination number, the number of ligand bonds to the metal, which influences the overall shape. This is a key concept in understanding how transition metals form stable, diverse compounds with different geometries. Now, let's take a moment to really think about this. This slide says, "Now solve this," and it's a little challenge for us. The idea here is to apply what we've been discussing so far. It's about taking the key concepts and putting them into practice. When we approach problems like this, it helps solidify our understanding and reveals any gaps we might still have. Remember, the goal isn't just to find the right answer, but to understand the process and logic behind it. So I encourage you to stay curious, think critically, and connect these ideas to the bigger picture we've been exploring. This is where the real learning happens. Now, let's look at the observations made with aqueous solutions to understand how we assign secondary valences to metals in different compounds. In this example, labeled 9.1, we see a set of values. For the first compound, the secondary valence is 6 and 4. For the second, it's 6 and 2, and so on. These numbers help us determine how many bonds a metal can form in a particular compound, based on experimental data. For instance, when we see a value of 6, it indicates the metal is capable of forming 6 bonds, which suggests a specific coordination number. Similarly, when the values are 4 or 2, it tells us about the possible bonding capacity of the metal in those compounds. It's important to note that these secondary valences are derived from actual observations, and they help us understand the geometry and bonding behavior of metals in aqueous solutions. This approach allows us to assign the correct secondary valence to a metal, which is crucial for predicting the structure and reactivity of these compounds. So, by analyzing these observed values, we can better understand the bonding environment of metals, which ties into the broader theme of how metals interact in different chemical contexts. This is key for predicting properties and designing new compounds in inorganic chemistry. Let's take a moment to understand the key difference between a double salt and a complex. Both involve coordination compounds, but they have distinct characteristics. A double salt is essentially a crystalline compound that forms when 2 different salts crystallize together. Importantly, when dissolved in water, these double salts tend to dissociate completely into their individual ions, meaning they don't retain their complex structure in solution. On the other hand, a complex is a coordination compound where a central metal ion is bonded to surrounding molecules or ions called ligands. These ligands form coordinate covalent bonds with the metal, creating a stable, often more intricate structure. The key point is that complexes usually remain intact in solution, maintaining their structure unless reacted upon or broken down under specific conditions. So, the main takeaway is that double salts are more like a physical mixture of salts that crystallize together, whereas complexes involve a chemical bonding process that creates a new, stable entity. Recognizing this difference helps us understand their roles and behaviors in various chemical reactions and applications, tying back into the larger theme of coordination chemistry we're exploring. Today, I want to clarify the differences between double salts and coordination compounds. Both involve complex structures, but they have distinct characteristics. Double salts are essentially crystalline compounds formed when two different salts crystallize together and maintain their individual identities. They typically dissociate into their constituent ions when dissolved in water. On the other hand, coordination compounds involve a central metal atom or ion bonded to surrounding molecules or ions called ligands, forming a single, complex entity. These are usually more stable and do not simply dissociate like double salts. Recognizing these differences is important because it helps us understand their unique behaviors in chemical reactions and their applications. This distinction ties into our overall theme of understanding complex chemical structures and their roles in chemistry. Now, let's look at some examples of double salts. These compounds are interesting because they contain two different types of salts combined within a single crystalline structure. They typically form when two salts crystallize together from a solution without reacting chemically with each other. An important point to remember is that double salts maintain their identity in the crystalline form, meaning they can be separated back into their individual salts through simple processes like dissolving and recrystallization. These examples help us understand how different salts can coexist and interact in nature and industry, showcasing the diversity and complexity of chemical compounds. This concept ties into our overall understanding of salt chemistry and its applications. Let's take a look at some examples of double salts. First, we have ammonium alum, which is chemically represented as NH42Al2. So 4,3,24H2O, this compound contains both ammonium and aluminum sulfate components. Next, we see Mohr's salt, or FeSO4, NH4,2SO46H2O, which is a double salt of ferrous sulfate and ammonium sulfate. It's often used in titrations because of its stability. Lastly, there's potash alum, K2SO4Al2, so 4,3,24H2O, which combines potassium sulfate with aluminum sulfate. These examples highlight how double salts are formed by the combination of two different salts that crystallize together. Understanding these compounds is important because they have specific uses in various industries, like water purification, medicine, and laboratory analysis. Recognizing their structure and composition helps us appreciate the diversity and utility of double salts in chemistry. Now, let's take a look at some important terms related to coordination compounds that will help us better understand their chemistry. When we talk about these compounds, certain key concepts come into play. First, the term ligand refers to the molecules or ions that attach to the central metal atom or ion. These ligands are crucial because they determine the properties and stability of the complex. Next, we have the coordinate number, which indicates how many ligands are attached to the metal center. This number helps us understand the geometry of the complex, whether it's tetrahedral, octahedral, or another shape. Another important term is chelating ligand, which is a ligand capable of forming multiple bonds with a single metal ion, creating a more stable complex. This concept is significant because chelation affects the reactivity and stability of the compound. We also encounter valence bond theory and crystal field theory, which are models used to explain how ligands interact with the metal center and influence properties like color and magnetism. Finally, understanding these terms is essential because they form the foundation for analyzing and predicting the behavior of coordination compounds in various chemical reactions and applications. So, keeping these concepts clear helps us see the bigger picture of how these fascinating compounds function. Let's take a closer look at some examples of coordination entities. For instance, Co. NH3 6 3+ is a classic example where a cobalt ion is surrounded by 6 ammonia molecules. Similarly, PtCl2 NH3 features a platinum center bonded to 2 chloride ions and 2 ammonia molecules. Then we have FeCN 6 where an iron ion is coordinated to 6 cyanide ligands. And don't forget about Ni-Co4, a molecule where nickel is bonded to 4 carbon monoxide ligands, forming a tetrahedral structure. All these examples illustrate the key idea that a coordination entity consists of a central metal atom or ion bonded to a specific number of ions or molecules, known as ligands. For example, in CoCl3 NH3 the cobalt ion is surrounded by 3 ammonia molecules and 3 chloride ions, showing how different ligands can coordinate to the same metal center. This concept is fundamental because it helps us understand the structure and properties of these complex molecules, which play important roles in chemistry and industrial applications. So, think of a coordination entity as a central metal atom or ion holding a set of ligands in a fixed arrangement, defining the structure and reactivity of the entire complex. Let's look at some examples of central atoms or ions in coordination entities. For instance, in NiCl2 H2O4, the central atom is Ni2+. Similarly, in CoCl NH3 5 2+, the central ion is Co3+. And in FeCN 6 it's Fe3+. These central atoms or ions are also known as Lewis acids because they can accept electron pairs. Now, in any coordination entity, the central atom or ion is the one to which a specific number of ions or groups are bound. These are arranged in a definite geometric pattern around it, which is key to understanding the structure. So, when we talk about the central atom or ion, we're referring to that core component that holds everything together, both structurally and in terms of electron interactions. Recognizing this helps us understand the overall geometry and bonding in coordination compounds, which is fundamental to grasping their chemistry. Let's take a closer look at the concept of a ligand. A ligand is essentially a molecule that binds to a specific site on a target protein, often a receptor. This binding is highly specific, meaning the ligand will fit into the receptor like a key into a lock. This specificity is crucial because it determines how signals are transmitted within our cells. When a ligand binds to its receptor, it can trigger a cascade of biological responses, which might include activating or inhibiting certain cellular processes. Understanding how ligands interact with their targets helps us grasp how drugs work, as many therapeutic agents are designed to mimic or block natural ligands. So, in essence, ligands are fundamental players in cellular communication and regulation, and they form the basis for much of pharmacology and biochemistry. Let's take a closer look at the different types of ligands. First, we have the chelate ligand, which is a special kind of polydentate ligand that can form multiple bonds with a single metal ion, creating a ring structure. This often results in more stable complexes. Moving on, we have polydentate or multidentate ligands, which are capable of attaching to a metal center through multiple binding sites. This multidentate nature enhances the stability of the complex significantly. Next, there's the ambidentate ligand, which can bind to the metal through different atoms, giving it 2 possible modes of attachment. Finally, we have monodentate or unidentate ligands, which attach to the metal through a single atom or binding site. Understanding these types helps us grasp how different ligands influence the structure and stability of metal complexes. Let's take a closer look at monodentate ligands. These are ligands that can coordinate to a central metal atom or ion through just a single donor atom. Think of them as one-point connectors. They attach at just one site. This simplicity makes them quite common in coordination chemistry. Examples include molecules like ammonia, water, and chloride ions, which each have one lone pair to donate. The key point here is that because they bind through a single atom, the overall structure and stability of the complex can depend heavily on that single point of attachment. When we connect this idea to the broader theme of ligand behavior, monodentate ligands highlight how even simple molecules can significantly influence the properties and geometry of metal complexes. Understanding these ligands helps us grasp how coordination compounds form and function in various chemical contexts. Polydentate ligand. So, let's talk about what makes a ligand polydentate. Essentially, these are ligands that have multiple points of attachment, meaning they can coordinate to a metal center through several atoms. This is quite different from monodentate ligands, which only bind through a single atom. The key advantage here is stability. Because a ligand can form multiple bonds, the overall complex tends to be more stable. This multidentate binding also influences the geometry and electronic properties of the complex. You'll often see these ligands in biological systems, like EDTA, which can bind to metal ions very tightly, making them useful in chelation therapy. Understanding polydentate ligands helps us grasp how complex structures form and remain stable in various chemical and biological contexts, tying back to the overall theme of coordination chemistry. Let's talk about ambidentate ligands. These are a special type of ligands that have the ability to coordinate to a metal atom or ion through two different atoms within the same molecule. The key point here is that the ligand can attach in more than one way, depending on the situation. For example, some ligands might have both a nitrogen and an oxygen atom capable of binding, but they won't bind both at the same time. Instead, they can choose which atom to use for bonding, leading to different coordination modes. This ability to bind through multiple sites adds a layer of complexity to coordination chemistry and influences the stability and properties of the resulting complex. Recognizing ambidentate ligands helps us understand the diversity of bonding behaviors in complex formation, connecting to our overall exploration of ligand characteristics and their roles in metal coordination. All right, let's talk about chelate ligands. When a ligand, whether it's D or polydentate, uses two or more of its donor atoms to bind to a single metal ion, we call that a chelate ligand. Essentially, it's like the ligand is holding onto the metal ion with multiple arms, creating a more stable complex. This concept is really important because chelation often increases the stability of the overall complex, which has significant implications in areas like biochemistry and industrial processes. So, in the context of our overall theme, understanding chelate ligands helps us see how ligands can form stronger, more stable bonds with metals, influencing everything from enzyme activity to metal detoxification. Thank you for joining me as we wrap up today's presentation. On this final slide, we see the word conclusion. I want to emphasize that this is where we tie everything together, highlighting the key points we've discussed. Throughout this presentation, we've explored the main concepts, the challenges, and the opportunities that lie ahead. The most important takeaway is understanding how these elements connect and reinforce the overall theme. Remember, applying these insights can make a real difference in our work and goals moving forward. So, I encourage you to reflect on these points and think about how you can implement them in your own context. Thank you for your attention and engagement. In conclusion, this chapter has taken us through a detailed exploration of coordination compounds, highlighting their unique properties and diverse applications across different fields. We've seen how understanding the fundamentals of coordination chemistry is crucial, not just for academic purposes, but also for practical uses in industries and medicine. Recognizing the significance of these compounds helps us appreciate their role in real-world innovations and solutions. Overall, grasping the nature of coordination chemistry opens up many possibilities for future advancements, making it a vital area of study in the broader context of chemistry and science as a whole.